Congressman, now that you've read the Supreme Court decision, which effectively says that they don't agree with that argument, what's your response?
Well, the court didn't exactly disagree with it. They just said that they're not the ones to figure it out. It's not going to be a matter for judicial resolution under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, but it's up to Congress to enforce it. I disagree with that interpretation just because the other parts of the 14th Amendment are self-executing. People can go to court and say that something violates equal protection, even if there's not a federal statute that allows them to do that. But in any event, the Supreme Court punted and said it's up to Congress to act. And so I am working with a number of my colleagues, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Eric Swalwell, to revive legislation that we had to set up a process by which we could determine that someone who committed insurrection is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And the House of Representatives already impeached Donald Trump for participating in insurrection by inciting it. So the House has already pronounced upon that, and there was also a 57-43 vote in the Senate. The question is whether Speaker Mike Johnson would allow us to bring this to the floor of the House.
In today's stunning Supreme Court ruling, all 9 justices unanimously agreed to allow Donald Trump to appear on the ballot, despite being found to have incited an insurrection by a trial judge in California, a trial judge in Colorado, and the Colorado Supreme Court. Their ruling stated that only Congress can bar anyone who engaged in insurrection from holding federal office. And so inexplicably, despite the fact that such a prohibition is in the Constitution, that a former federal office holder found to have engaged in or given aid or comfort to those who've engaged in insurrection cannot hold federal office, apparently the Supreme Court decided that such a provision is completely unenforceable without legislation from Congress. And surely, if there's one thing that this Congress will not hesitate to do, it'll be to pass legislation seeking to hold insurrectionists to account. In fact, I'll bet that this woman will be the first to author that bill.
Just finished with our meetings here at the White House this afternoon. We had a great planning session for our January 6th objection. We aren't going to let this election be stolen by Joe Biden and the Democrats. President Trump won by a landslide. Call your House reps, call your senators from your states. We've got to make sure they're on board, and we already have a lot of people engaged.
Of course, the reality is that the Supreme Court knows full well that the Republican-controlled House will never pass this legislation, if for nothing else than the fact that its Republican members themselves either participated in or supported the insurrection at the heart of this matter. This is like Roy Moore authoring anti-molestation legislation, or Lauren Boebert authoring a bill barring public displays of affection, or Marjorie Taylor Greene authoring legislation preventing people with IQs below a certain threshold from entering Congress. Generally, people don't like to vote against their own interests. And the Supreme Court knows that, so while this might seem like it's intended to empower the Congress, in reality, they know that such a move is a death knell to actually enforcing the Constitution. But at the end of the day, that's what they want, because just like the Mike Johnson-led House, the Supreme Court is a broken, partisan institution, and its justices who control it are just as brazen as the rest of the hacks in the GOP who we have the misfortune of hearing from on a daily basis. But the only difference between Clarence Thomas and Jim Jordan is that one wears a robe and the other doesn't. I spoke with my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner about the viability of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment in light of this decision, and here's what he had to say.
So is this basically an admission that as of right now, and until such time as Congress actually passes a law to be able to enforce the 14th Amendment, that the 14th Amendment is basically null and void at the moment? That Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, barring insurrectionists who've held federal office before from running again, or those who've given aid or comfort to those who've engaged in insurrection, that amendment is basically just null and void for the moment?
That section of the 14th Amendment is null and void unless Congress gets off its duff, works together in a cooperative fashion, immediately passes legislation, and then implements it against who? Donald Trump, the leading candidate for the Republican nomination. So I'm going to stick with your formulation that, yes, in the real world, in Washington, D.C., disqualification is dead.
In other words, the Supreme Court is now content to invalidate a major provision of the U.S. Constitution, the same Constitution that they're supposed to enforce, all in deference to a criminal former president. To say that this court is not meeting the moment would be the understatement of the century, which led to this statement by Glenn.
This, unfortunately, Brian, I say this with no glee. I don't say it casually. I don't say it cavalierly. We are a failed government in some of the arenas that success matters most. We're not succeeding. We're not capable of succeeding. And I think this unanimous Supreme Court opinion, 9-0. Now, there are some dissents where they call Donald Trump out as being a stone cold insurrectionist, but it was 9-0 on the decision that only Congress can do it, and they have to get to work and pass some legislation to make it a reality, which we all know will not happen. A 9-0 decision means it's the law of the land, right? Whether it's right or wrong doesn't really matter. It's the unanimous law of the land and a unanimous interpretation of the Constitution, and we are stuck with it. There is no appeal from a Supreme Court ruling. Where does that leave us, Brian? We both know where it leaves us. Our viewers know where it leaves us. The rule of law won't save us. The courts won't save us. Congress won't save us. We will save us by getting to the polls in November in numbers too big to rig and too real to steal. We are the only ones who can save us. We did it in 2020. We're going to do it again in November 2024.
And that's a point I'm going to reiterate, just like I've been doing in light of other moves by the Supreme Court this past week. It is not up to the courts to save us, just like it's not up to our elected officials to save us, or lawyers to save us, or secretaries of state, or attorneys general, or state parties. At the end of the day, the onus has always been on us. It is our responsibility to not only turn out to vote, but to ensure that those around us, our people, our circles, turn out to vote too. That's our job. And the fact that we have a rogue Supreme Court shouldn't discourage us. It should light a fire under our asses to work even harder. Because a day like today is all the proof you need that our democracy is not a given. We are on the precipice right now, and there are a lot of really powerful people on the other side working to ensure that we slide full tilt into autocracy. But I want to be absolutely clear. We are more powerful, and they know that. We are the reason that Joe Biden's in the White House right now and not Donald Trump. We're the reason that Democrats control the Senate right now and not Mitch McConnell. And we're the reason that Mike Johnson has a majority so small in the House, he isn't able to maneuver an inch. And we're going to be the reason that Democrats wake up on November 6th and breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that Trump and his enablers will continue to be locked out of power. If we weren't that powerful, they wouldn't be working so hard to prevent our voices from being heard. They wouldn't be passing voter ID and banning drop boxes and removing voting locations from minority and student precincts and so much more. That's how powerful we are, that they've dedicated their entire agenda to stopping us. They want you to feel helpless precisely because they know how much power you have. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.